memorize these values using the unit circle, go for it. You are welcome to do that. I'm going to show you where they come from with triangles. So I'm looking at 3 special right triangles here. I'm looking at the 30, 60, 90 special right triangle, and I'm looking at the 45, 45, 90 special right triangle. Alright, so I'm just going to use these triangles to come up with these ratios for 30 degrees, 60 degrees, 45 degrees, blah, blah, blah. Alright, so if I'm looking for 30 degrees is going to become my theta. So this side across is going to be my opposite. This side is going to be my adjacent, and of course, the side from across from the right angle is always going to be the hypotenuse. Now, what are these values going to be? Well, if you remember the values, remember when I talked about in the introduction, if they're similar triangles, they're all proportional. So I'm just going to use the simplest number I can. So the smallest side, I'm going to let that be 1. Alright, special right triangle, this is 30, 60, 90. That means my hypotenuse is twice that. So that's going to be 2. And then the side across from the 60-degree angle is that smallest side times the square root of 3. So that's going to be the square root of 3. Alright, I'm going to use those sides to come up with my exact values. So if I'm looking for the sine of 30 degrees, the sine of 30 degrees, 30 degrees is my reference angle, so I'm doing opposite over hypotenuse, opposite over hypotenuse. So the sine of 30 degrees is 1/2. Okay, the cosine of 30 degrees is going to be my adjacent over my hypotenuse. So I've got my adjacent over my hypotenuse, which is the square root of 3 over 2. My tangent is going to be my opposite over my adjacent. So my opposite over my adjacent. Remember that I do not keep that radical in the denominator, so I'm going to multiply by the square root of 3. So the tangent of 30 degrees is going to be the square root of 3 over 3. Then I'm going to do the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of cosecant is sine, so I'm going to flip that. So the cosecant of 30 degrees is 2. The secant is going to be 2 over the square root of 3, or the reciprocal of cosine, and I'm going to get rid of that radical again. So that's going to simplify to 2 times the square root of 3 over 3. And then the cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent, which is going to be the square root of 3 over 1, or just the square root of 3. So if I know my special right triangles and the proportions of each side, then I can fill in the chart without even having to memorize it. But either way it goes, you have to know it. You have to know it. Alright, let's do one more. Let's do 45 degrees. So once again, I'm going to use the smallest ratio I can. So I'm going to use 1 for my sides for my 45, across from my 45 degrees, which means special right triangle, if that side is 1 and that side is 1, I've got an isosceles triangle, then the hypotenuse is going to be the square root of 2. Okay? Now, if I'm looking for my trig ratios, the sine of 45 degrees, the opposite, and it doesn't matter which one you use since they're both the same, so I'm going to let this be my theta. So I'm going to do opposite over hypotenuse, which is 1 the square root of 2, or square root of 2 over 2. Cosine, adjacent over hypotenuse, same thing, square root of 2 over 2. And then I've got tangent, which is opposite over adjacent, or 1 over 1, which is 1. Alright, my cosecant, I'm going to flip that, so that's going to be the square root of 2 over 1. My secant, same thing, and then my cotangent is that. Okay, so I'm going to let y'all just find that chart in your book or memorize that chart. Just realize how important it is. You've got to know the exact values for these 3 trig values, trig ratios. Okay? Now, I wouldn't normally go ahead and talk about quadrantal angles if you were in my regular class. Since this is an online class, I'm going to go ahead and tell you what a quadrantal angle is and include that in the chart. So a quadrantal angle, those are just angles whose terminal side lies on the x or the y axis. What does that mean? That means that the terminal side is going to be here, 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 or here. And we've already talked about what that is either going to be 0 or 360. That's going to be 90 degrees, or pi over 2. That's going to be 180 degrees, or pi, and this is going to be 270 degrees, or 3 pi over 2. All right, so a quadrantal angle's terminal side lies on the x or the y-axis. Now, I am actually going to use the unit circle to show you how I come up with this. If I have a unit circle, and the unit circle is just a circle with radius 1, if I drop a right triangle, so I am using a triangle, but if I drop a right triangle here, what is the value of that side right there? Well, that's x. You don't know exactly what it is, but it's x, right? What's the value of this side right here? Well, this is my vertical line, so that value is going to be y, right? Go across is my x, up and down is my y value. All right, if I'm looking to see what theta is, well, look, the side across from my theta is y. My hypotenuse is 1, which means opposite hypotenuse. Opposite hypotenuse. What are you thinking about? You're thinking the sine of theta. The sine of theta is y over 1, or just y. If I do the same thing and I look to see what x is, well, that relationship with theta is adjacent. So I've got my adjacent and my hypotenuse, which means the cosine of theta is x over 1, or just x. All right, so this is going to be key. The key to this is that y is going to equal my sine of theta. My x is going to equal the cosine of theta. All right, so if I'm looking for what those exact values are, let's think about it. What would this point right here be on the unit circle? What would be, my x is 1, my y is 0. What would this point be? I go up 1, across, over, rise over run. So I've not gone up across any, I've gone up 1, so that point's going to be 0, 1. Over here, that's going to be negative 1, 0. And then down here, it's going to be 0, negative 1. All right, so if I'm looking for my quadrantal angles, I'm looking at, remember that x is cosine, y is sine. Okay? So if I go back in here to fill in my chart with my quadrantal angles, let's look at 0 degrees. 0 degrees and 360, that would be the same thing. All right, if I'm looking for the sine of 0 degrees, that's my y value, that's 0. The cosine of 0 degrees is 1. The tangent would be sine over cosine, or 0 over 1, which is 0. If I flip that, cosecant would be the reciprocal of sine, so instead of 0, it would be undefined. The secant would be the reciprocal of cosine, so it would be 0 over 1, which is 0, and then I'm back to 1 over 0, or the reciprocal of tangent, which would also be undefined. And you can go all the way around. 270, what would my sine value be? Well, it's negative 1. It's my cosine value, that's my x value, that's 0. And I just keep going until my chart is filled in. All right, you've got to know this chart. You've got to know your 30, 45, 60 angles, and you've got to know the quadrantal angle.